Podcast by Friday, episode 57. I think when we're talking about, repurposing your content, it's like, you remember those old infomercials where they would talk about the Vegematic? It slices, it dices, it does julienne fries, it's like they repurpose in the same machine several times.
That's true. You're right. Exactly.
And that's all they're doing. Podcast by Friday with Bill Griggs and Kingsley Grant. We help people to create their minimal viable podcast by taking bold action to defeat procrastination and to get their voices heard.
I'm Kingsley Grant.
And I'm Bill Griggs.
And you're listening to
Podcast by Friday. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Podcast by Friday. I am Bill Griggs, and I'm here with my co-host, main man, and inspiration, Kingsley Grant. How are you doing today, Kingsley Grant?
Hey, Bill, I am doing exceedingly well, my friend. It's great to get behind this microphone with you and to do a podcast interview. It's really a special moment, and I appreciate you being a co-host with me on this podcast.
My pleasure, man. I'll tell you, we have a blast doing these podcasts, and I hope the audience enjoys it as much as I do, getting to share and talk with you about, what's going on in our world as we're building our podcasts and, growing our audience.
Yeah, and, I think it's one of those things when we're able to continually give value to our audience by saying, hey, here's what's happening. Here's what we think is helpful to you or will be helpful to you. And so when I have an opportunity to do that with you, it's almost like us getting together and allowing our audience to come inside of our heads and see what's happening and hear what's happening, and then to extract the information they need from that. So I just really enjoy these moments for this very purpose, this very reason, really.
Mm-hmm. And just a quick recap of some of the cool things that are going on with you, Kingsley. You recently had a very major occurrence happen as far as your business goes. And I don't know that we've talked about it on the podcast yet, but I'd like to take a brief moment and mention your new book.
Thank you, Bill. I really appreciate that. And I think it's so fitting because we're going to talk about today repurposing your content to grow your audience. And I think how you mentioned that is really a good way, because it's what I did was repurpose content in a sense and launched and published my newest book, The Intelligent Leader, Succeed Where Others Failed and Become the Leader Everyone Loves and Wants to Follow. And really it's, to me, having the opportunity to speak about leadership and the paradigm, I believe, for the 21st century leader and what is needed to succeed, capturing all that in a book format, putting it out there. At times it's a bit scary to know there's going to be that one person, right, that's going to critique and say negative things. There are always those people, mm-hmm. right? And so having your work out there, it's like, oh, man, I hope I don't get any terrible and, kind of feedback or reviews that said, because we all have feelings. And so, but I'm excited about it because I'm now creating talks and stuff around it. And it's one of my best work, I think, so far. And that's why I'm so thrilled to talk about this book any and every opportunity I get.
Mm-hmm. And, it's very cool. I've watched portions of your book launch and, seen how you have used specific topics inside of your book as ways to catch the attention of your readers and your potential audience through some Facebook posts and, some Instagram things. And, it's a perfect example to look at how you can take content that you created once and use it in different and new ways to reach people that you might not have reached otherwise. Because let's face it, people like to consume content in many different ways. Some people are very visual. They like to see things. Others are readers. And, yet still others like the spoken word. And there are many other ways that people consume content, but those are some of the big three. And, when I think about it, there's many examples that we can learn from what you did in your book.
Yeah, it's so true. And I've watched the big guys, right? The big cojones guys who are actually doing this stuff and see what they do. And basically they're doing this very thing, right? We see the Russell Brunson from ClickFunnels, right? We see the Tony Robbins, we see the Brendan Burchard, and just on and on and on. And for me, the person that I really look to is John Maxwell, how he has really honed in on that one space on leadership and the different things he does, the coaching, the speaking, the courses just on and on and on. He's mastered that. So we're trying to, I think, is learn from people who are doing the things we want to do. And if they're doing it, there's a reason why they're pumping millions and millions of dollars in that strategy, right? And so if we are seeing that, that means, hey, it's a demand out there, right? Why can't we get in on it as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the millions and millions of dollars, but the reality is that if people are advertising or marketing something long term and they continually spend, then that is a good indication that it is a profitable or at least a break-even proposition for them. So, because nobody can afford to spend money on advertisements that don't move the needle, that don't convert, that don't do anything to help grow your business. You should only spend long-term on things that make a difference. And if you don't have the budget to spend, there are other ways to achieve the same result, and that is by putting out content in places where people see them and where people can react to them and where people want to be involved with them. That's the whole purpose of repurposing your content.
Yeah, I think, Bill, and the same token, I'm wondering, as a person, those who are listening to us right now, and sometimes we have a person, when they hear the word repurpose, they're wondering, okay, what does that mean? Or they might say, I tried it, it didn't work. And so how would you then kind of speak to that person who might be thinking that, I've tried this whole idea of repurposing things and just never actually see it work for me. And so they're coming in and they're listening with us with that kind of, a bit of they're not all in yet because they've been burnt or something like that or failed at it.
Well, the whole process of marketing your blog, in other words, getting people to look and take some action in your blog or your podcast in this case, the whole thing behind that is you've got to go out and you've got to try to see what works. You have to measure what is working, and then you make adjustments. There is no home run. There's no instant home run that you can say, well, I'm going to put everything out in Facebook and life will be great. Or I'm going to put everything out in Pinterest and life will be great. Or I'm going to go strictly with LinkedIn and life will be great. You can't just do that. You have to actually try those things and measure the results. And, in the example of Facebook, for instance, you would use something like a Facebook tracking pixel. But I'm going a little too deep here, too early, but I'm going to just say this. Just having a Facebook tracking pixel on your page or in your episode or is not enough. You have to go in and you have to make some adjustments and settings inside of the Facebook Ad Manager so that it accurately tracks the results. Not just that somebody's been there. And, that's a whole nother episode. There was a recent thing in Michael Stelzner's podcast about just this very thing. And, I will put a link to that episode in the show notes. And, you can go and you can check that out if that's something that really interests you, if you want to dive deep. So I'm coming back up to the surface now.
Yeah, because I think sometimes people who say they have tried, maybe it's not necessarily their fault. They got bad information. They bought something they thought would be the answer to solve a problem, and so when it failed, when it never worked out in their repurposing attempt, they're taking it like, oh, see, it doesn't work, and so we're just simply saying it may not be that it didn't work because it's your fault. It's just probably you had bad information. Probably you didn't have someone to guide you in the process. And we're simply saying, well, we're going to explain what it is we have done and what has worked for us. And you have kind of built up, you've kind of gotten to know us by listening to us for some time. And if this is your first time listening to us, we're going to just, hopefully you can just trust us in the onset here, or go back and listen to some of our episodes and get to know us a little bit more. But the point is that it may not be your fault why it did not work, right? And so I can understand the idea of having a suspicion about, okay, I'm going to trust these guys now, and what difference will they bring to me to allay my fear of, and so we get it because we've been there. I have been burned so many times that I at one point when Bill invited me to join ClickFunnels with him, and he was telling me about ClickFunnels, he was all excited. And I'm thinking, okay, Bill, you go ahead with your excitement. Because I was kind of, I wouldn't say burnt out in the idea of trying new ways to generate income. I just really was kind of weary or leery. Let's put the word leery more so there. Mm-hmm. And because I've tried different things, but then Bill began to do it himself. I watched him and began to see the results he was having. And so the next time it came around, I entered and I joined ClickFunnels. And then I realized that, man, what if I did not join? I would have missed out from learning so many different things that I learned and actually have benefited from. So if you're there right now when we're talking about repurposing and somehow it's kind of going through where we're going to take you in a different direction, hopefully, that can allay your fears and just allow you to know, hey, it's okay. It wasn't your fault that you failed or it did not work out. Let's call it bad information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that what you just said, it was very, very insightful, Kingsley. One thing that I want to point out, and I have a favorite saying, and I don't know who to attribute it to, so it's mine now. But success leaves clues.
Yeah.
And you think about this. Whoever it is that you admire that is doing podcasting or blogging or content creation, you all have some hero. If you look at what they did, there are clues there for you, because things work for a reason, and things aren't really that difficult once you examine them. And this is one of those things where repurposing your content is not that difficult. Others have done it successfully, and you can too. And that's why we're here to talk to you about it today, because it's been done. We've done it, and you can too.
And, I really think the segue into even the idea of repurposing. So let me share then the working definition that we're using when we mentioned the word repurpose, right? And again, it's from dictionary.com, and it says repurpose means to find a new use for an idea, a product, or building, or to use something for a different purpose to the one for which it was originally intended. So we're simply saying we're going to help you see what is another way to use an idea that you once have and which you did because you had a blog, which we now call, let's look at it as a transcript. You transcribe from your head onto paper, onto your blog, what it is, the ideas you had going through your head. You spend time researching, you spend time laying out that in a very readable manner where we can scan and hit those spots that we will, how we read nowadays. We don't necessarily read everything unless something pulls us in. So you've mastered that. You've mastered the transcript part, the scripting part of the idea. And we're simply saying, what else can you do with that to grow your audience? And the word repurposing is that word that comes to our mind that says, hey, let's find a different way to use this idea. You spend so much time and effort and probably some money to get the information you've gotten. And so why should it only be used once? I love what Russell Brunson said in one of the things. We were in this one funnel away challenge with him. And he said, in his book, actually one of his books, he said, there's a lady, I don't remember her name, but who said, you guys, you entrepreneurs are not that smart. He said, imagine you are the person who had a play, for example, and you have this play you worked on and worked on and worked on, and then you have it one time presented, and then you move on to creating the next play. So as entrepreneur, that's what you guys do. You do something, and then you move on to next. And she said, no, why not take that play to another city, and then another city, and then another city, until it's all played out. The same content you would do that with. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we spend all our times on trying to put a blog together, and we stop there. That's all we got from it, when it could have more legs and more mileage with the same content you've created.
That's so true. Back when I started blogging, and my first blog was makermasters.com. Anybody wants to go check it out, it's still out there, makermasters.com. I was writing a lot of stuff about CNC routers, which are, woodworking machines that make things, from a program that you design on your computer. All right. Real simple stuff. And
to you, it's simple.
Yeah. But in the early days, nobody knew how to do this. And so I went step by step through, and I showed folks how to create a sign, from going out in the yard and taking a picture. In this case, it was the sign of a cow for my neighbor's Holstein farm. Okay. So I took a picture of their cow and, went and did all the Photoshop stuff. And then I went and I threw it into, another program, and I created all the artwork that was needed to create a 3-dimensional sign that I could make on this computerized machine. And so what I did was I took pictures of all of that, and I wrote blog posts, and it ended up being like a 10 blog post series.
Wow.
And still today I'm getting people who see that. Well, after I wrote it, I didn't really do anything with it. It just sat there for years. I mean, it's been, I think that was like 2010 or 9 or 10 or 11, something like that. But it's still getting hits every day. But then Kingsley and I got to talking one day about repurposing. And, we had this discussion, how can we use these things that we've had that are, proven? People are going to look at them, and, how can we get more eyes on them? And it's funny. I'm going to tell you about a new product, and it's an affiliate product. So, if you go and order this is something that, we get a small commission from, but it wouldn't cost you any extra. But it's an awesome program, and it's called Designer.io. And what this did was I had that blog post sitting out there, that series of 10 blog posts sitting out there for years. And when I went into Designer, and in a matter of just, maybe a half hour, I was able to take the blog posts that I had already had, load them into Designer, and it created an ebook from those posts. And that ebook I used as the basis of my funnel when I did this ClickFunnels things that Kingsley and I were talking about earlier. Ended up with like a 50 or 60 page book.
Wow.
With no more real output from me than I had already done, 8 years ago or 7 years ago or however long ago it was. the technology was there for me to grab my blog post and to dump it into Designer and have it come up with a very good looking book. And, so if you want to check out Designer or you want to see my ebook, we'll put a link inside of the show notes. You can just go to podcastbyfriday.com/designer. And, it'll show you an example of my book, and it'll show you what that program is. Really inexpensive way to get your blog post repurposed into ebooks or into a PDF or into a 3D image, all in one program. The whole purpose of this wasn't to hawk Designer, but to prove that it doesn't have to be hard.
I think as you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking that you mentioned earlier about my book, and I remember I did a workshop in September of 2018, and when I saw the response of the attendees and just the way the feedback, the evaluation, and the interaction, I'm thinking, man, I'm onto something here, right? Now I did the work of the research months and months in advance and preparing for the workshop on emotional intelligence and leadership. And I'm thinking, maybe I'm onto something like I just said. What if I was able to put this in a book format? And that the wheel started churning and churning. And so towards the end of the year, I began to outline this book. And basically, fast forward almost 6 months later or 5 months later, the book was written and published. And actually, it's content that I created for a workshop, a live workshop, that now became my book, which is a flagship book, which now I can go back and do the workshops elsewhere, which I'm going to be doing a couple this year, and then have the books to sell at the workshop. So now it's really an incredible way. But we talk about the idea of growing your audience, and that is exactly what it does. My book is available now. And by the way, can I just do a self? What's it?
Go ahead, plug it, buddy.
Okay, there you go. So if you want a free copy as our Podcast by Friday listener, okay, so as a listener to this show, I'm going to make a free copy available to you. All you got to do is pay for shipping and handling. So if you go to kingsleygrant.com/free leadership book, kingsleygrant.com/free leadership book, you can find out how to get a free copy and only pay for shipping and handling. And this is the idea of fitting into repurposing content that you've put together. So we've talked now about the scripting part, the writing part, the blogging, the book. And now here's the part that I think I love, because I love to talk, as you can probably imagine by now, that audio of repurposing your content as an audio, which leads us to our podcast.
Sure. Yeah, I think audio is one of the best ways to repurpose content, in my personal opinion. This is the section of our show where we would normally pause for a word from our sponsor. Now, if you would like to be the sponsor of the Podcast by Friday show, and you have a product or service that you feel would be of benefit to new entrepreneurs starting their new podcast, then contact us at podcast@podcastbyfriday.com, and we'll see if you'd be a good fit. I think audio is one of the best ways to repurpose content, in my personal opinion, because I do audio, obviously. But, you think about it. Let's take an example of Robert Kiyosaki. Many people have heard of him. He's the author of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad series of books. If you haven't read them, go check them out. They're awesome. But you can get his book, okay? And you can read his book. But I'll tell you, I bet you he sells more audio books where he's reading his own book in his own words, in his own voice, than he's selling print books after the initial launch. And you see this time and time again with platforms like Audible. when somebody is actually speaking their book, in audio form, the folks will run to get that versus the hardcover book. And sometimes they'll buy both.
You know what, Bill? I think you just said something about Robert Kiyosaki about the Rich Dad Poor Dad. My first, I bought the book. I can't remember when now because it's an old book, right? And it sat here and sat here and sat here. And would you believe that I actually did not read the book until the audio came out?
Mm-hmm.
I got the audio version of it, and then that's when I actually consumed the content. And then I was able to go back to the book and reference parts of the book because I love to have the feel in my hand and all of that. I guess the old school thing. I guess that's how I was raised, so I love that feel. And it's true. Most of the books I consume right now is in audio.
Yeah.
And so we're simply saying, as we're encouraging you to start a podcast, and we have outlined in previous episodes about how quickly you can get a podcast up and running. Because, for example, my podcast, my other podcast, and Bill knows this, that I did that. I started that in just really basically no time. I actually use a podcast by Friday framework of how to get a podcast up and going. I started that in March and just pull the trigger. I use a platform called Anchor. We talked about that in a previous episode. We'll put that in the show notes. The other links we mentioned here will be in the show notes, so you will have access to them. And I was able to get the podcast up and running, have it been distributed to other platforms where, like Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and all those. And today, the show has hit 30 countries right now and growing just because I pulled the trigger and put an audio format where people love to consume. Well, some people do. And you're giving them the way they want it, the way they like it. Because not everyone likes to sit down and read.
Mm-hmm.
They may come back to your blog if they find an audio that intrigues them. Because you may not say the same word for word on your audio that you have on your blog. I mean, mix it up. I just have in my audio that I did, I don't put everything in my script as my podcast article because I just reference back, hey, go back to my podcast and hear more. So people can toggle between those, the writing and the listening. And man, it's really an awesome opportunity and game changer when you're giving people more than one way to consume your content.
Mm-hmm. And, let's just talk about audio for audio's sake. I mean, you can take your blog posts and you can turn them into audio. You can take your book and you can turn them into audio, your podcast, whatever. You can also just take an audio file and put it up anywhere. I've been doing live broadcasts on Facebook for the last 3 months consistently. I think I've only missed 3 days in 3 months.
Wow,
from putting out a live audio video thing. But my point is, when I got this video out there, these live videos, I can take the audio, strip it out as an MP3, and I can load it up onto my YouTube channel, or I can load it up into LinkedIn, or I can load it up into Google Play, or I can load it into any platform I want as an audio file and reach a different person than I would have reached with, just a video or just a blog post. And that's the whole point. Different people like to receive things in different ways. And, when you can do something once and use it many times, that's efficiency. And, this is all about efficiency.
And it's one way to grow your audience on a platform or somewhere else that other people are hanging out, that they may not be hanging out where you're originally posting those content. For example, Bill mentioned video. I will take my podcast that I recorded. I would write a post and put it on LinkedIn. And I would put that post by tweaking it very slightly on Medium. and I would put that same post on Thrive Global. So that same content is now as audio, it's on Medium, it's on Thrive Global, and it's on LinkedIn. And then I create up to a 10-minute video and now put that back on LinkedIn and also on Instagram. Same content. Now imagine that's 5 different ways for people to, 6 different ways for people to consume one content that I've created. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting more mileage. So the idea then of growing your audience exponentially is now what's at play, because people who are on Instagram may not be on LinkedIn, may not be on Medium, may not be on Thrive Global, may not be on Apple Podcasts and wherever else it's been hosted, but they are Instagram. Mm-hmm. So give it to them where they're hanging out, and that is one way to grow your audience, by repurposing your content.
And one thing that you didn't mention about video, taking your video, was to put it on YouTube.
That's true too, yeah.
Now, you would think that would be the obvious choice on YouTube, but there is a specific reason why you want to put your video or even your audio onto YouTube. That is because YouTube is owned by Google. And there's an interesting phenomena that happens when you do your keyword research. And, you can go back and look at our past episodes where we've talked about using keywords to pop up higher in search results. But when you do a video about your topic and it has a descriptive title, which it has because you had the same descriptive title in your blog, okay? When you created your podcast, whatever topic it is, and you're laser focused on that topic in that video, when it gets indexed, videos show up at the top of the page in Google search. You don't believe me? Just type into Google anything that you want. You'll see 2 or 3 videos that pop up at the top of the Google search results for whatever it is that you typed in. So by having a video version of your content, you're more likely to pop up in a Google search.
Because YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world, right? Mm-hmm. Google is first,
yep,
and YouTube is second.
Yeah.
So it's a great place to have your content.
Yep. And so, that is repurposing of another kind, where you're repurposing your video content to game Google. Really, Google's making it easy for you because Google owns both companies. They want them both to succeed, and they know people like video. And they know, so they're going to pop those up in the search results so that you'll go to their other property and they'll make money off of you and YouTube.
So really, I think I'm sure by now that you have really, we're not trying to sell you on something or convince you on something that you probably don't know. We're just simply saying, here's what we have done. We've used all these methods, and we've seen how that have worked. Actually, I'm seeing more and more. I was telling Bill earlier, before we began our interview, our show here, that I recently posted something on LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn, of course, is more for professionals and business and all those different things. And I began to write some articles, more extended articles for LinkedIn. On there, they have a posting areas where you can, it's called a LinkedIn Pulse. You can write a long article, whereas you cannot post a long article on your main page because it will kick it out. Mm-hmm. So I wrote this article, and someone who is in the emotional intelligence space like I am is a guy who's an author who has written, he writes for Inc., he writes for, some of the big platforms. So I didn't even know of him until he read one of my articles and said in a message, he said, "Oh, Kingsley, nice to meet you, da-da-da. I'm looking forward to reading your because I'm doing a 3-part series on the skills that will have you as a leader almost always get celebrity treatment." That was the topic of the blog posts. And he said, "I love the article. I can't wait to read your other portions of the article that are coming up." Now, that's an exposure I would never have had. he reached out to me. Now he is going to be a guest on my show that came as a result of that. I don't know how his platform is as far as influence, but his book has been translated in 4 different languages, 4 different countries. Mm-hmm. So obviously it's a book that has a far reach. So I'm going to have that author on my show. How did all that happen? By simply repurposing my content that I did as a podcast into a content on LinkedIn that he saw. And we're simply saying it works.
Mm-hmm. You know, Kingsley, we're sitting here talking about repurposing our content and you know, putting the same content in multiple places. And I'm sure that our listeners' heads are spinning. Man, I barely have enough time to get out my podcast and my blog post. How am I going to do 6 or 7 things? You know, put this 6 or 7 places, and you know that sounds like a whole lot of work. How do we do it? I mean, you know, is there a system that we've come up with that we use on a daily basis to make this our life easier? You know, in my case, there's some answers. What about in yours, Kingsley?
Well, you know, I think it's a great question, and I believe that a person who's listening right now may have that very same kind of pushback, and I just don't have time. Well, what I've realized is that once I record my podcast and I put that out there, I don't do extensive show notes. I did maybe about 3 paragraphs on that. Now I take that and I put that into a longer post in LinkedIn. Once it's on LinkedIn, I just go into Thrive Global and into Medium and just say at the bottom of it, previously published on LinkedIn. So the same article, how long did it take me? Copy, paste, put a new note, put some tags on there, boom, right? I may put a different graphic on there as well sometimes just to mix it up, but it's the same article, boom, it's there, right? I take the same article I just did a podcast, so it's fresh in my mind, get on the camera and my phone, put it up and it could be less than 10 minutes, or it could be 3 minutes, 4 minutes on the topic, and just tease out 1 or 2 ideas and just say, if you want to know more, here's the link to my podcast. Boom.
Mm-hmm. Now, for me, I like to use tools to do things. That's no big surprise if you know that I'm a maker. Tools would seem like an interesting thing. So I will have templates in certain programs that I can use that are already pre-formatted by me. Work I did once that I can reuse again and again and again. And so when I get done, I'll take this template and I'll dump the information from that article into this template. You know, there's certain sections like, did I use resources? You know, and you know, who was mentioned, what website? You know, I put all that stuff down there into this thing, and then I dump the main article in, and now it's ready to go at the click of a button after basically just copying and pasting whatever it was. I also have a template that when I created a video, that I can embed that video into, you know, my blog post, or, you know, going back the other way now. See, so think about this. Most of these services have some form of automation or templates that you can use to streamline your process, and you just need to look into it and see, you know, what you can use, and that'll help you.
You know, it's a great point, Bill, because like Medium, all it asks is, once you are the writer of the article, and maybe as a blogger listening right now, if you haven't used Medium, sign up for Medium, is free. There's a paid version, which I don't use, but you can if you wanted to. But all it simply says, as long as you're the original creator of the content, post the link here. Medium pull everything in, the article, everything in, and at the bottom it even puts that it was previously published on where it's coming from, and then boom, it's out there. So I didn't have to actually copy and paste in Medium. So that's really the template idea is great, because I think it saves you of putting repeated information that you would do on a regular basis. Just have it in a template idea, so it's one step less you have to do. So, Bill, I think we basically took some time to share on this repurposing your content, and I believe that our listener have truly realize the importance of this. But not only that, but to realize the potential of growing their audience, which I believe that's what they want. And I think we've given them the tools or the resources or the ideas of what to do to make that happen.
Yep. You think about this now, you're only going to be able to grow an audience so large on a single platform. Whether it's Facebook, there's only, however many billion of people are on Facebook. But when you look at LinkedIn as well, there's, that size audience, and, Pinterest or whatever. Each of these has their own audiences, and that's how large you can grow. If you only choose to be in one, that's the largest that you could ever potentially grow. So you've got to take and put your content out in multiple places if you expect to grow rapidly. And that's 101. That is, the basic thing. If you learn nothing else today, it's that you need to be in multiple places. You need to be everywhere. Pat Flynn's always saying that, be everywhere. And, that's the whole point of this episode, to help you start thinking about this when you create something new, how you can use it again to grow.
And so what we would love to see as a result of this episode today, I would love to see our audience see, as you're listening, that you would let us know what you've done, right? So we have a Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/podcast by Friday. And we would love for you to actually request to join the group and then post a link to your original content you have as a blog. And then, here's the key, put a link to where you repurposed it, what you did. Oh, we would love to actually support you and share some feedback on that content that you have posted the link to. So make sure you request to join the group at facebook.com/groups/podcast by Friday.
Yep, and we'll go in and we will look at your content. And more importantly, the other members of our group will probably go and look at your content too. And you can look at theirs.
There you go.
And you think about that, just how quickly you can grow just from the simple context of having people who are bloggers, who are putting out podcasts. They're already in your same sphere of influence, looking at your stuff. And maybe you'll learn something from them, and maybe they'll learn something from you. And isn't that what it's all about?
And then it's like, hey, they will also pass the word around and share your content with someone else, or maybe on their social media. So, hey, it's a win-win opportunity we're providing you.
Oh, fantastic. I'm so glad that we took the time to talk about repurposing content so that we could help you grow your audience today. Because, it's really an important step, and it's an important factor in your growth. We all create content because we love to, and because we want to be heard by others and share. And it's fantastic when you can actually see the results happening in real time.
Sure it is. So, Bill, it was a pleasure again recording another episode of Podcast by Friday. And I think that I really enjoyed this recording because I believe it's something that we are both doing and have seen results. And so we want the same thing for our audience as well. And so anytime it's something that creates a win-win for both of us, the audience and ourselves, man, I'm all in.
Yeah, and there's so many things that we didn't get a chance to talk about today too.
But you can't put everything in one podcast.
No,
right?
You can't. And, if you want to hear some more ideas, come and join us in our group at facebook.com/groups. It's Podcast by Friday. And we'll talk about them there.
Yes.
Yeah, and share them with you. So I hope that you all have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kingsley. Always a pleasure getting a chance to speak with you about what we love doing, taking our blogs and creating podcasts.
Awesome sauce.
Podcast by Friday. Take bold action to create your minimal viable podcast today. Check out new episodes at podcastbyfriday.com or on iTunes or Spreaker.